I wasn't looking for giants when I found the photograph. It was dated June 1897, published in the St. Paul Globe, showing a skeleton reportedly unearthed near Mapleton, Minnesota, measured at 11 feet 5 inches. The image was grainy, sepia-toned, the bones laid out beside 3 stiffly dressed men in bowler hats. And what struck me wasn't just the size, it was the headline. Strange Giant Unearthed, Smithsonian Interested. Not tall, enormous. The official explanation is simple: newspaper exaggeration, hoaxes, 19th century sensationalism. But as I zoomed in on that photograph, adjusting the contrast, studying the proportions of the femur against the men standing beside it, something felt wrong. The scale wasn't theatrical, it was anatomical. Then I found the map, and everything we think we know about a forgotten empire called Tartaria began to feel incomplete. The official explanation is that giant skeletons are myths, misidentifications, medical anomalies like acromegaly, or outright hoaxes from a less scientifically rigorous era. We're told that if giants truly existed, there would be irrefutable evidence in museums, DNA, full skeletal remains, academic consensus. But the deeper I went, the more that explanation started to fray. On August 8, 1883, the New York Times reported on the discovery of gigantic human remains in Clearwater, Minnesota, describing a skull twice the size of an ordinary man's. The article mentions measurements, 7 feet from head to foot for a partial skeleton, though much was damaged. Then, on September 23, 1902, the Los Angeles Herald documented skeletons found in Lompoc, California, allegedly measuring between 8 and 9 feet tall, with double rows of teeth. According to the article, the remains were examined by local physicians before being sent east. Sent east. To where? Here's where the pattern starts to emerge. It's not just one article, it's dozens, across states, across decades. On May 19, 1871, the Wisconsin State Journal reported large human bones unearthed during road construction near Jefferson County, describing skulls too large for modern cranium measurements. In 1891, the Mound Builders Association report referenced oversized skeletons found in burial mounds throughout Ohio and Illinois, some measuring over 8 feet. Then I started noticing something else. Many of these finds were associated with ancient mound sites, structures attributed to indigenous cultures, but often described in early accounts as mysterious or unknown. The skeletons were consistently described as larger than average, sometimes dramatically so. And this wasn't just America. In 1833, near Lompoc Ranch, California, Spanish settlers reportedly uncovered remains in ceremonial stone enclosures. In 1895, the London Globe mentioned giant skeletons discovered near Cardiff, Wales, measuring over 10 feet, though later dismissed as exaggeration. The deeper I went, the more I found. Not just skeletons, but architecture. Massive stone doorways in old European cities, buildings from the 1700s with ceilings 18 to 24 feet high, staircases with steps nearly twice the rise of modern standards. We're told it was aesthetic, grand design. But why build doors 15 feet tall for people averaging 5'7"? And that's when the official explanations began to collapse. I started examining the buildings themselves. Go to St. Petersburg, Russia, and stand before the Winter Palace, completed in 1762. The doors rise nearly 20 feet high. The windows tower above street level. Even the columns, granite monoliths weighing over 100 tons, seem designed for something larger. Now go to Paris. The Palais Garnier, opened in 1875, features ceilings soaring over 60 feet in the grand foyer. Ornate balconies that feel scaled beyond comfort. Look at old photographs from Chicago, 1893, during the World's Columbian Exposition. entire cities of neoclassical buildings erected within 2 years, vast cathedral-like halls with colossal arches. We're told they were temporary, built of plaster and staff. But look closely at the masonry and surviving images, the proportions. The windows are lined at heights impractical for human occupancy. I measured doorway heights in preserved 18th century buildings in Boston's Beacon Hill, several exceeding 12 feet. Not decorative arches, functional doorways. Then I compared them to modern human ergonomics. The scale is off, but that's not even the strangest part. Many of these structures were later demolished. Entire city blocks of oversized architecture removed between 1900 and 1920, replaced with smaller, more efficient designs. Why build monumental structures only to tear them down within decades? Then I discovered something that changed everything. Old maps labelled a vast region across Central Asia and Siberia as Great Tartary. Then I pulled up maps from Abraham Ortelius, published in 1570. His Theatrum Orbis Terrarum clearly labels a massive territory spanning from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean as Tartaria. In 1744, French cartographer Guillaume de Lisle printed detailed maps dividing Tartary into Chinese Tartary, Independent Tartary, and Russian Tartary. It wasn't a small region, it was immense. Yet by the late 19th century, the term vanishes from atlases. The records show something similar in encyclopedias. The 1771 edition of Encyclopedia Britannica references Tartary as a vast country in northern Asia. By the 1911 edition, the term is largely obsolete, fragmented into modern nation-states. Empires don't just disappear linguistically. Then I found an 1863 edition of the New American Cyclopedia describing Tartary as little known, but populated by diverse tribes of uncertain origin. Uncertain origin. Contemporary accounts describe Tartars as formidable, sometimes described with unusual stature. Medieval chronicles, like those attributed to Giovanni da Pian del Carpine in 1246, refer to towering warriors during Mongol expansions. Were these exaggerations? Possibly. But why does an entire continental designation vanish from common usage within a century? What I found next shouldn't be possible. According to Captain Richard H. Pratt, writing in the late 19th century about mound excavations in the Midwest, skeletons were found of unusual size and robust frame. Though he stops short of calling them giants, the phrasing is careful. In 1877, Scientific American referenced large skeletons discovered in Nevada's Lovelock Cave, some allegedly over 8 feet tall, though later explanations attributed them to mismeasurement. Contemporary accounts describe red-haired remains found in that cave system. Indigenous Paiute legends speak of the Site-Ka, described as taller adversaries. Are legends literal or metaphorical? In 1880, the Daily Telegraph in London published an account of giant bones found near Castelnau, France, with fragments allegedly measuring lengths consistent with a 12-foot individual. The anthropologist Georges Vacher de la Pouge reportedly examined them. But later? Silence. The bones were said to be sent to Paris. To which institution? Records become vague, filed away, never prominently displayed. The pattern kept mounting. But here's what's truly remarkable. Count the reports. Between 1830 and 1910, American newspapers alone printed over 1,000 articles referencing oversized human remains. Across continents, North America, Europe, Asia, within the same decades. Then count the architectural parallels. Neoclassical structures in New York, Berlin, Moscow, and Buenos Aires between 1850 and 1900 share striking design features: colossal columns, massive door frames, elevated first floors several meters above ground level. Within the same half-century, across continents. What explains that synchronization? And why does the term Tartaria fade just as industrial modernity rises? The scale, the skeletons, the maps, it's not isolated, it's systemic. Here's where it gets truly unexplainable. Let me propose something that sounds absurd until you examine the evidence. What if these massive buildings weren't simply aesthetic choices, but remnants? What if Tartaria wasn't just a vague geographical label, but the fragmented memory of a vast Eurasian civilization? And what if reports of giants weren't myths, but distorted accounts of a taller ruling or guardian class? Consider the possibility that before 1800, parts of Eurasia were unified under a loosely connected cultural sphere we now reduce to scattered tribes. Before 1800, maps show Great Tartary as a continental entity. During 1800 to 1900, industrialization, urban fires, rapid architectural demolition, and the rewriting of encyclopedias. After 1900, Tartaria is gone from language. Giant skeleton reports taper off. Oversized architecture replaced. What if a cataclysm, natural or otherwise, occurred in the 18th or early 19th century? Mudflood theories attempt to explain partially buried first floors seen in older buildings. Cities like Seattle and Chicago famously rebuilt after fires in 1871 and 1889, raising street levels. This would explain why lower windows are underground in many 19th century structures. This would account for the synchronized architectural resets across continents. This might explain why giant skeleton reports cluster around mound sites, burial grounds of an earlier people. Some will say, human height variation explains it. Hoaxes explain it. Translation errors explain Tartary. And maybe they do. But that doesn't account for the convergence, the architectural scale, the map erasure, the synchronized disappearance of reports. One explanation, perhaps the only explanation that ties it together, is that something existed before our recorded modern narrative. A civilization large enough to leave continental traces. Guardians of Tartaria? It sounds like fantasy, until you count the doors. So why isn't this common knowledge? What happened to the evidence? In 1901, the Smithsonian Institution reportedly received numerous skeletal remains from mound excavations. Yet today, when researchers request documentation of giant skeletons, the official position is clear. No verified remains of anomalous height exist. Museum specimens are often described as lost during routine transfers. Not destroyed, just misplaced. Fires conveniently consumed archives. The Chicago fire of 1871, the San Francisco fire of 1906, university collections discarded during catalog modernization. Maps change between editions. Encyclopedias condense entries. It's not active suppression, it's passive erasure. Universities stopped researching mound anomalies by the early 20th century. Academic papers describing oversized remains were never followed up. Interesting, but not significant. Medical anomaly, construction exaggeration, photographic artifact, filed away and never examined again. What's not documented is the connection, the why, the how. And maybe that's intentional. The silence is deafening. I've shown you the buildings, the maps, the newspaper records, the eyewitness accounts. I can't prove this, not definitively. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmented, partially missing. But why does Tartaria vanish from our vocabulary within decades? Why do giant skeleton reports cluster in the 19th century and then disappear? Why were so many monumental buildings demolished between 1900 and 1920? What explains the synchronized architectural scale across continents? Who benefits from historical simplification? If you've seen these patterns, if you've stood in front of a building and felt its proportions were wrong, you know what I'm talking about. If you've pulled up old maps and wondered why certain names disappear, you're not alone. Leave a comment. Share examples from your city. Tell me what you've found buried, bricked over, or renamed. This investigation is just beginning. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. It just waits for the right questions. And that's just what they let us see. Don't forget to subscribe.